Okay. So are you good to start now, or did you want to wait a minute?
Just let's go for it. Let's get right on into it. I've only got one camera today, so I can't really give you a camera. Is that okay?
Oh, that no problem at all. That we don't want people distracted about how handsome I am anyway. So,
Okay.
but
All right. Hit me up. What you got?
yeah. So I did a live stream the other day. I had met several people that were big fans of yours, and I've been watching your content off and on for about a month. And they recommended I get in touch with you about. I think they believe that you're for the impeachment of Trump, based on the impeachment hearings.
That's a pretty hard one. I'm in favor of wherever things wind up. I mean, it kind of seems pretty bad right now for the Trumpster, but yeah, I mean, whatever happens, happens. I guess I'm not like super hanging my hat on impeachment or anything.
Okay. Um, why do you think that I still haven't really got a clear answer for why the Democrats think Trump should be impeached? Is my understanding is it's not just a quid pro quo. It's that it has to be a quid pro quo with ill intent behind it for a personal gain or something like that. Would you agree with
No,
that?
I don't think it has to be. There doesn't have to be personal intent at all. Congress has the power to appropriate funds for other countries. The president doesn't really have the power to mess with that. And it seems like Trump was trying to extract political favors from Ukraine in an effort, and then was holding that aid a hostage to them. It seems to be what all the testimony points to so far.
Well, I kind of disagree that that's the criteria for what should be impeachable because it seems that in foreign policy, particularly with aid, we use quid pro quo all the time. In fact, that's exactly what Biden admitted to doing. He personally told them, we're going to withhold $1 billion in loan unless you fire this particular prosecutor. The reason it seems to me the Democrats are okay with that, they say, oh, but that was for the good of the country. So therefore, that quid pro quo, even though it was congressionally approved aid, was okay.
So I don't know as much about the Biden stuff,
Mhm.
and I don't really care about the whataboutisms that Trumpers like to pull when it comes to other types of politicians. It's entirely possible that Biden did bad stuff as well. I don't really know. I don't really care. I don't particularly like Biden, but it is not common practice for the president of the United States to hold aid that's already been approved over another country's head to extract information off of a political opponent, and then to request that said investigation be made public. Like it's very clearly, and the fact that quid pro quo, whether it even happened or not, the idea that Trump attempted to do it is just bad in and of itself, and that offense alone is impeachable.
Well, I don't think it's whataboutism, and here's why. The actual what Biden did, the fact that it's potentially being investigated, and it's not just Biden, by the way. This is somewhere the Republicans go wrong on. It's actually the Obama administration because Biden admits in his
So
speech. I'm sorry. Go
before,
ahead.
just to cut off this whole line, so let's say that Obama and Biden did bad stuff
Yeah.
and can be prosecuted for it. Could Trump still have done bad stuff as well?
No, because if Trump is using his position as the leader of the executive branch, which is to enforce laws, we have a long tradition in this country of the executive branch looking into things like corruption, including people from past administrations. For example,
Yeah, but we
we.
don't have a long tradition of the president. Firstly, when it comes to looking into corruption or whatever, the Department of Justice historically stands separate from the office of the presidency. It's not normal for the president to direct the Department of Justice. Those are two institutions that are supposed to stand separate of their own, aside from the fact that the president makes the appointee or appoints the head of the DOJ. But other than that, the institutions are supposed to stand separately, first of all. And secondly, it's still not within the purview of the president to hold foreign aid that's already been approved by Congress, which already has the power of the purse, to take that foreign aid that's been approved and to use that as leverage against a current political opponent is highly irregular. None of that is normal.
But it's because the reason that it's an irregular situation is because what was being investigated itself was an unprecedented situation. Can you name me one other time in the history of the United States that any executive branch official has withheld congressional aid to fire a prosecutor?
I can't, but again, that's whataboutism. Can you name me another time in presidential history where a president has asked another country to dig up dirt on current opponents that like
Yeah, we saw that with Obama. We know for a fact that what Obama was doing was talking to people, particularly in the Five Eyes Agreement, all of our allies, about finding potential crimes that Trump committed, whether it be colluding with Russia or other things like that. And by the way,
So,
Obama,
firstly, hold on, hold on, hold
sure.
on. Again, okay. So this is a really common problem with a lot of Republicans.
Mhm.
These institutions don't function this way. The FBI doesn't function under the order of Obama. Obama does not order the FBI to talk to allies that we have. So, for instance, in our Five Eyes alliances, we don't. That doesn't work that way. Obama wasn't investigating Donald Trump The FBI had investigations related to Donald Trump. That's not an Obama investigation.
Right, but we know that we can even see through text of Strzok and Page that we know that Obama was asked to be kept aware of this. And we also have it's unprecedented that we've ever had a situation where personal phone calls have been leaked, not just leaked like with Trump, but actually had to have the transcript released. So we have no idea specifically what Obama was talking about to his counterparts in these countries. All we know
Okay,
is
wait.
sure, go ahead, I'm
There's
sorry.
so much. Yeah, keeping Obama informed is part of the job of some of our intelligence agencies. It doesn't mean he's directing them. Just because somebody's keeping you informed, it doesn't mean that they're giving you direction.
Well,
You
but
should the president should probably be aware of ongoing investigations
right.
like this. Absolutely. I mean, I think that would be a good idea, but
Well, right, but you could say the same thing with what we see with the transcript with Trump's call. Trump didn't say, I'm personally directing. He said, I would like you to cooperate with my DOJ and
Trump
Barr.
literally personally requested that the investigation into Biden's son be made public by Ukraine. That was a literal request by Trump made that it's been supported by multiple testimonies given so far. Obama has done nothing of the sort. You never saw anything where Obama was saying, in fact, Obama's even said that he was like, that he tried like very hard to keep that stuff separated. It's one of the reasons why Comey went public with the information that he did into like Hillary's emails. There's a lot of weird, like people trying not to say anything publicly. That was a huge trend in Obama's administration. People try not to come out publicly and say stuff. But in Trump's administration, everything is tried to be made public like very quickly. Like,
Well, two points on that. One, that's just I don't believe that characterization. In fact, we know that Obama laxed regulations like never before to ensure that different agencies under his administration before Trump took over were able to share all the information of the Trump-Russia collusion investigation, which predictably then led to record amount of leaks. For example, we know that Brennan was working for CNN, suggested to Comey that Comey actually briefed Trump on the P dossier, then used that hook of the P dossier for CNN to run the story the next day. So there was clearly unprecedented leaks, whether they were coming straight from Obama or not. The fact is, he was
there were unprecedented leaks. I don't know if we just call it unprecedented, sure, but there's a lot of leaky shit right now. There was a lot of leaky shit in Obama's administration. There's a lot of leaky shit in Trump's administration. Like when you get to the level of being a billionaire, you're going to be surrounded by a fuck ton of people, of course. And we've seen that Trump has severely compromised judgment when it comes to who he surrounds himself with. For instance, Giuliani or Cohen or Roger Stone, like all these people that are, you know, catching charges and shit or just are fucking insane. So it's not really surprising to me that there are leaks, and I don't need a conspiracy theory to explain the fact that a lot of the people around Trump are quite leaky.
Yeah, but it
Manafort,
wasn't. The leaks almost universally are opposed to Trump, and most of them are for people at the tops of the intel agency. So, for example, we know that the IG report found that it recommended a criminal referral to Comey, but said beyond that he had broke FBI policy by leaking information, some of which was classified. Like we know for a fact that happened, but again,
it's possible that other people made like mistakes. This is we're whataboutisming to like a huge level. It's like it's possible the FBI made mistakes. A lot of people believe that Comey made mistakes when he went public with a lot of different things. When he talked publicly about the Hillary email stuff, a lot of people believe that was a mistake. But none of these mistakes exonerate Trump. The fact that people leak bad stuff about Trump doesn't excuse the bad stuff that's leaked. And I don't think you need a greater conspiracy to explain like all the leaky shit around Trump.
Okay, it's neither here nor there, I guess, for the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm making is that if there was a reason to, there's three things that Trump wanted an investigation of, or that what he talked specifically, that all the testimony says. By the way, there has been not one person that testified that Trump personally said that he wanted anything in exchange for aid. It's all, or in exchange for this congressional aid. It's all based on their presumption, they said. I could leave you
a lot of testimony, a lot of presumptions, a lot of people that have the understanding that Trump was threatening to withhold aid or wasn't going to exchange aid without that investigation not only being started but being publicly announced. That's what the testimony thus far has shown.
Taylor said that he heard through one of his aides who heard through one of Sondland aides that Trump told Sondland that in the phone. So then when we get to Sondland's testimony, Sondland says, I presume there was a quid pro quo, but when he's specifically asked by Schiff, he says, oh no, I asked Trump an open-ended question. He even said he probably used a 4-letter word, but basically he said, I said, what do you want from Ukraine? And Trump said, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. I want Zelensky to do what he promised to do when he was elected.
Yeah, he said that explicitly after things were heating up and leaks had started about it. Of course, it's strange to me because you would never apply the same standard to somebody like Obama. Like, unless Trump literally is on a recording saying, like, I am requesting a formal quid pro quo from Ukraine. I want to, like, unless you have those exact words, it seems like nothing he says or does will like like prove that he's probably engaged in some pretty shitty behavior.
Well,
Like I mean, like just on a withdraw, like
sure.
pulling back on a broader frame. Are you really comfortable that the president of the United States is making requests to other countries to publicly declare an investigation into a political opponent? It seems insane to me.
Yes, I'm perfectly fine with it. Just like I was perfectly fine with the Obama administration and all of the people under them, rather, even if you don't think Obama was personally involved, making sure that the president-elect of our country, Donald Trump, was not a Russian asset. I was okay with that as well.
Okay, so two things. One, Obama doesn't direct the FBI. Okay, these institutions stand separately. Two, fuck Obama. I don't like Obama. I don't care about Obama. I'm not here to defend Obama. Obama could have fucked up too. That doesn't exonerate Trump. The pivots to Obama doesn't help Trump look any better.
Okay, take Obama or the FBI or anyone out of it. Did you personally think there was enough evidence to warrant investigation into Trump and his team as to whether or not they colluded with Russia?
It seemed to be the case, yeah.
Okay, but no one said, well, wait, it's unfair for the Democrats to be spearheading that investigation because it's their political opponent. We were told the implication is so severe, we could possibly have a president that's under the thumb of one of our enemies, that we need an investigation, right?
Do you recall any other massive investigations going on at the same time about a potential political person?
Like Hillary?
Yes. Like, that probably cost her the election. Trump's stuff was pretty secretive until I think it was after he was elected, we started to find out way more information related to the FISA warrants and everything. If you want to complain about an unfair investigation swaying the last election, you should be looking at the Hillary email thing, not anything related to Trump, which there was way more evidence for than anything related to Hillary's email that got dragged out for years.
Well, again, that's neither here nor there than just the general point. We could say that it is okay at points for people to want investigations into their political opponents.
Sure, but the general point was, and maybe my timelines are fucked, I don't recall there being public statements about Trump being under investigation while he was running for president.
There were. Harry Reid, for example, I think 4 days before the election, wrote a letter to the Senate. Then he also released. Mother Jones also did an article about the dossier. So there was stuff out there. Also, if you want to get technical about it, Comey's admitted that the only reason he reopened the investigation was two things. One, there was a whistleblower within the FBI that knew that Strzok had been sitting on Weiner's laptop for over a month, which that's kind of a funny phrase, sitting on Weiner's laptop. But anyways, the second point is Comey admitted the reason he did this was he assumed that Hillary had the election in the bag, and he didn't want this to be an albatross over her neck for her first 3 or 4 months when people found out, oh, the FBI sat on this laptop until after the election.
So I don't know if that's true, if that's something that he wrote in his book. Regardless of whether or not that's true, that's still super far removed from anything we're talking about.
I agree.
The idea that well, okay, but you brought it up. The idea that investigations hurt like Trump more than Hillary is asinine. The investigations most likely would have been like the tipping point that cost Hillary her election. The emails were in the news constantly for a year. We didn't start to hear about the FISA stuff, about all the stuff related to Manafort and Carter Page and all these other people. We didn't start to hear about this until after Trump already won the election. So the idea that these investigations are causing somebody not to get elected, I mean, if you want to take that stance, sure we can, but then you'd be defending Hillary, not Trump.
Well, I didn't make the point about Hillary at all, and I didn't say that the investigations hurt Trump more than Hillary. I'm merely making the point here that we expect our executive branch at times. It's okay. I don't mean it had to come directly from Obama or Hillary or Trump or Bill Clinton, whoever the executive is, but we expect that sometimes it's okay for them to investigate crimes if there's a reasonable suspicion that there's crimes, because it was their opponent.
But the precedent that's set is for the DOJ is that typically they are very cautious. This is something Comey's publicly talked about as well. They're typically, this is one of the reasons why Comey got so much heat. The DOJ is typically very cautious about publicly declaring anything related to investigations close to election time because they want to protect the integrity of our electoral process. The FBI doesn't typically want to come out and say things like, by the way, we're investigating this candidate running for president, because it's not the FBI's job to determine who's voted for by the American people. This is one of the things that's talked about pretty publicly quite a bit. Comey's brought this up a lot. That stands in stark contrast to Trump saying, hey, Ukraine, can you guys publicly announce that you started an investigation on Biden's son? He didn't even wait for any results or for any investigation to happen. He just wanted a public announcement that the investigation was even begun, which shows pretty clearly that he's not really concerned about getting to the bottom of anything. He just wants to hurt a political opponent.
No, that I disagree. But as is one, we still have no evidence that Trump specifically said that. But even if we assume
have tons, we have so much testimony right now that shows that Trump from so many people. What do you mean? Okay.
No, I honestly, I'm asking because we've had people say we presume this is what Trump wanted, but their number one witness, Sondland, says, I specifically talked to Trump. He didn't say that. Now, you'll say, well, of course, Trump was lying. But even if we grant that, like, for example, with Hillary's investigation, the reason she was left off was because we couldn't prove intent. Why would that standard be any different here? We can't just say, well, a bunch of people presumed what Trump felt in his heart. By the way, that's the same thing they say about Biden. They presume that Biden's
intent. You don't need to prove intent when it comes to things like extortion or quid pro quos.
But
That's not the intent is part of the crime.
But right, but you need to prove that that's what he intended to do. Have a quid pro. Well, why wouldn't you?
If I go up to you and I say you need to pay me like $1,000 or I'm going to kill you, that's the crime is done in and of itself.
If you say that, but if you just say, "Hey, I'd like Rob to give me $1,000," and then people say, "I presume that meant he threatened to kill him unless he gave $1,000," that would be unfair to you.
That's just not what Trump's done. Trump made a request. And then he was holding the aid hostage in exchange for that request of an investigation.
But we don't have proof of that. We don't have proof and there's clearly the only reason that we would need. Let me put it this way: the only way we could assume that would be if there's not other plausible explanations. And there's all kinds of other plausible explanations, such as we know that Trump doesn't want to give foreign aid to pretty much any country. Such as
Trump's call to make.
Well, I know, I understand that, but that's a different issue as to whether or not this is impeachment, whether it was extortion. That's just you saying Trump's using executive power more than he should, which, by the way, I agree he and all presidents, at least in my lifetime before him, have done. I find that to be a very reasonable criticism of Trump, that he's expanded.
Why has Trump kept so many people from testifying? If he thinks that he's in the clear or whatever, if he thinks that he's fine, why has he kept so many people, like all the people that could either exonerate him or convict him, I guess, depending on their testimony? Why has he kept people from testifying if he thinks he's so much in the clear?
Well, because it's his right. Because why did he release the transcript? Like, he's been asked to do.
He didn't release a transcript, to be clear. That wasn't a word-for-word transcript of the call. That was like a summary.
Yes. But even the Democrat witnesses admitted that it was that the summary acts as an effective transcript because it was pretty accurate. I think they quibbled about, did the word company, was that replaced with the word Burisma? But I'll give you that. I understand what you're saying. But it's the same argument could be used all the time. You could use the same argument for Biden. Why is Schiff refusing to let the whistleblower testify? Why is Schiff refusing to have Joe or Hunter Biden testify? Now, this isn't one about it.
Why do we why do we keep pivoting to these guys? The question is whether or not Trump abused his power of the president to withhold foreign aid until an investigation was announced by Ukraine. That's the question. Fuck Biden and Obama and Hillary and John F. Kennedy and anybody else you want to talk about. None of these people matter to this. I don't care about I don't like any of these people. I'm not going to defend them. I'm
not asking you to defend them. The point is, if there is reason for an investigation, then what Trump did wasn't impeachable. If there is
not true.
Sure it is.
Even if they did something bad, even if Biden's son was the fucking devil incarnate, even if Epstein, all the child rape was directed by Hunter Biden himself, that still doesn't excuse Trump withholding aid until an investigation is announced by the Ukraine.
Would you admit that it's not cut and dry, it's more of a political calculus when it comes to impeachment?
That's not what we're talking about at all right now, but of course.
Right. So the argument would be then, what you're saying is the Democrats will say, we're fully admitting that Obama and Biden did exactly what we're accusing Trump of right now. And we're fully admitting that not only do we not want them impeached, but we're saying that even wanting an investigation into that is a bad idea and criminal. But Trump should still be impeached for this.
Fuck Obama and Biden. Okay.
But not them.
We can't impeach them. We can't impeach them. They're not in office anymore.
Sure, you can still impeach them.
In terms of criminal, what?
I believe you could impeach a past president. It wouldn't have much effect, but
okay.
I think that's the law.
If you can, I've never heard that before.
Maybe I think you can. I don't know.
Even if you could, then fuck them. Then do it. I don't care. But that still doesn't exonerate Trump.
But no, but it's not them that I'm concerned about. It's the Democrats like Schiff, like Pelosi, like Schumer. Because we know then if our argument then becomes, well, Trump should go down for this, even though we know the Democrats did this 4 years ago, and many of those same Democrats were okay with it then and are now voting to impeach. That's the double standard, and that's because it's a political...
Okay with what then? Nobody else was withholding aid from foreign countries in exchange for...
That's exactly what Biden admitted to do. That's what the Obama administration did. Exactly what they did.
Biden was not the president.
Right, Obama, he said in his conversation, he said, I told them you have 6 hours to fire this prosecutor or I'm withholding $1 billion aid. They said to Biden, in Biden's own word, you're not the president. Biden said, call him. He said that we could do this. So yeah, you're right. It's not Biden. It's the Obama administration. He gave Biden the go-ahead to withhold aid that was congressionally approved unless they fired a prosecutor who happened to be looking into Biden's son.
Okay. I don't know if that's 100% true because I haven't looked into that. I suspect that that's exactly how it went down. I'm pretty sure the rationale there was far different because there was a lot of corruption surrounding that prosecutor. I don't know 100% if that's true. It's what I've heard, but I haven't looked into that. But even if that was all true, even if Obama himself said "fuck you," blah blah blah, and withheld aid. That
Mhm.
still doesn't exonerate Trump.
Well, it does in the sense that I think that it's okay for us to engage in foreign policy. I have no problem with our executive authority withholding foreign aid to get something in exchange, as long as it's to benefit the country and not to benefit yourself personally.
It's to benefit Trump.
But that's why the starting question is, that's why it's not whataboutism. If we could prove that there was
If we knew about this all the time, why didn't Trump do this investigation at any time over the past 4 years?
Well,
why have we waited till now?
Sure, if you watch the testimony from all the Democratic witnesses, all of them said verbatim over and over, Zelensky is finally a guy that's anti-corruption. He's the real deal. He's surrounding himself with prosecutors to fight corruption. I don't know if you knew this, but Zelensky was basically the Jon Stewart of the Ukraine. He's a stand-up comic. And this is real quick, if you give me 30 seconds, this is just my layman's view of what's going on in the Ukraine. You had 2014, you had this president, Yanukovych, who was like a pro-Putin stooge. Then he gets removed for Poroshenko, who's basically a Western stooge. The people of the Ukraine are just sick and tired of it, just like me and you would be with our political system. They just want someone looking out for themselves. So 75% of them vote for a stand-up comedian. This is Trump's first attempt to talk to this person. And so he's just like, hey, are you going to investigate corruption that occurred in the past administration?
Okay.
And that's why I think...
I guess we'll just have to wait and see how the impeachment hearings turn out. And we'll go from there. Like I said, I'm not super invested in this topic. I find it strange how much charitability we extend when we're a Republican to Trump, and then how quick we are to convict past presidents who are Democrats of certain crimes. But I don't really care much about the impeachment stuff. We'll wait and see.
Well, if I could just say, I don't feel, and I understand, and you're perfectly within your rights and probably correct to assume, to paint with a broad brush. I think that people on all sides tend to be super forgiving and super one-sided when defending their side. And I'm guilty of that as well. But I am telling you, I had no problem with Obama working with foreign allies to investigate Trump for possible collusion with Russia, or Obama's DOJ or whatever. So I don't think that that's the case. And I think that all I'm trying to get is, I think for you and your audience, and correct me if I'm wrong in painting with a broad brush, I would guess that most of you dislike Trump and probably would want to see Trump at least lose the 2020 election. And I would point you to people like Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald, because I think they're right that all of these investigations are actually harming Democrats' chances of beating Trump in 2020.
Do you want to talk about an optics point of view? I don't think impeachment is good at all, but that's a totally different question about whether or not Trump has committed crimes, or whether or not you should be worried at how Trump is acting in the office of president.
But I think, though, that I'm more worried the fact that we have an entire establishment, particularly the establishment Democrats, that are doing everything possible to cover up the actual investigation we should be having, which was 2016 Ukrainian election interference and the Bidens and their role in the Burisma company. I mean, we were told...
probably wouldn't end well if we were to do that, because that, the Yukovich, whatever what was the guy's name?
Yanukovych.
Manafort extensively helped that guy's campaign. So I'm guessing that anything you dig up there is probably going to come back on Trump to some extent as well, because Trump decided to surround himself with people like Manafort. So, I mean, I doubt that he's very invested in any type of investigation that involves that anyway. So,
well, I mean, but that's kind of the crux of this in the first place. We were told for 3 years that foreign election interference is the biggest deal in our country. No stone could be left unturned. Now we have public admissions in the Financial Times of August 2016 from a parliamentarian in the Ukraine named Lyshenko, admitting that he worked with the Anti-Corruption Bureau, which is the FBI of the Ukraine, in releasing a black ledger about Manafort because he wanted to swing the election for Hillary. Now, that's election interference. We also have proof that there was a DNC operative named Alexandra Chalupa that actually was working with officials in the Ukraine to get that dirt. That's exactly what Trump was accused of for 3 years. But every single Democrat on the impeachment testimony said, oh, no, that's a conspiracy theory.
I don't think... I feel like I've heard about this, and I feel like none of this actually happened.
Oh, it happened. I mean, I could send you the evidence via email or whatever.
Do you think that there was any conspiracy, like the Guccifer hacking with Russia working with Assange or anything like that, or do you believe that all of that is fake? Or
I don't know. I'm very distrusting of the intelligence community. I have questions, for example, as to why the intelligence community would capitulate to the DNC and not get their hands on the physical server. But I'm willing to say I could say
they didn't get their hands on the physical server because they didn't need the physical server. It wasn't necessary. Like, you don't need a physical drive to analyze the contents of the drive. So you can take an image of the drive. You don't really need, having a physical drive doesn't really do anything. Right?
But we know that from Comey's own testimony that the FBI prefers to have the physical copy because their worry is they're the best professionals at this in the world, and they don't want to rely on a possible mistake copying from a private company like CrowdStrike. So the FBI actually did request, and the DNC denied allowing access to the physical. Why would they do that unless they had something that, if it was going to be the exact same as getting a copy, what incentive does
so like the Ukraine interference stuff that you've brought up, I'm briefly familiar with. I'm uncomfortable talking about it but I'm like 99% sure that is entirely baseless conspiracy theory.
No, it's
like,
not.
the prosecutor that pushed that got fired for like corruption or some shit. That none of that actually happened the way that. But the fact that but maybe that did happen. But the fact that you're so willing to believe that, but you're saying I don't really trust the FBI's conclusion on the investigations that they did. That's highly suspect to me. Like, so you think that all of the indictments that Mueller made relating to those Russians, the Internet Research Agency, the shell company that they had operated in the US, all of that was 100% fabricated and fake?
No, I'm not saying that. In fact, I'm saying I'm basically agnostic on the hack. It could very well be that the FBI, I don't know enough technologically wise to know whether or not it happened as is being said. So I'm not condemning that the FBI was wrong about that. And in my argumentation and dealing with these things, I've assumed that they're right when it comes to the hack. Now, I have questions why they didn't get to the physical server, but that's neither here nor there. As far as the Russian trolls and using Pokemon Go, yeah, that's a joke. Not only is it a joke, I'm sure they did it, but for example, a judge actually admonished Barr and Mueller, saying that they're no longer allowed to publicly say that those people in that agency were connected to Putin because they have presented zero proof. So what we have is 12 people who happen to be Russia that were putting a bunch of stupid memes on Facebook and Twitter. If we're going to act like that seriously affected an election where $500 billion were spent and all sorts of things in the mainstream media, I mean, that's a joke.
Okay, hold on. Actually, can you tell me real quick, what did you just say? That a judge told Barr and someone else that...
Mueller and Barr, yes. A judge admonished...
What was this judge's name?
It's...
So Mueller and Barr are no longer allowed to say the Internet Research Agency was all fake?
No. They're not allowed to say it was directed by Vladimir Putin. They thought that was... the judge found that was actually leading a potential jury because they had presented no proof, even to this judge, that there was any connection to the Russian government whatsoever. And that was the judge that was...
Well, I can wait a few minutes. Can you throw me up a link on that?
Sure, I absolutely will try to do that.
Okay, and I can wait a few minutes. I understand if you don't have this on hand.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
Need to see this.
By the way, you're absolutely correct to demand people put sources up because anyone can see. Sorry, my internet's... So I got this Washington Times article. I think this will do it. And it's, I'll put a link up, but let me just read it real quick to make sure it's the right one, because I'm just getting that. Federal judge sides with Russian company, rebukes Mueller and Barr, from the Washington Times, July 21st. It says, it has chastised Mueller and attorney Barr for stating Russian government was behind the election year social media. The ruling by District Judge Dabney L. Friedrich culminated in a secret legal battle between the Justice Department. And I'll put that link if you want as well. But yeah, basically...
I already have it. Hold on one second. Let me read this.
Sure, please. I'll leave you go.
Okay, so this is saying that basically the judge is telling Mueller and Barr that they're not allowed to state to a jury that the Kremlin was personally involved in the direction of this company, but that it was still a Russian company that was involved in American propaganda, right?
Yes, exactly right. So all we know is that, so the idea that this was at the behest of the Russian government, we don't know that at all. We don't have proof of that. We just have proof it was a Russian company. And I don't deny that this
You think
happened.
It's more likely to assume that just a random Russian company decided to set up shop in the United States under a fake name and then mislead Americans that worked with them into thinking they were working with fellow Americans to try to throw the election for a different candidate?
Well, what I think's most likely is irrelevant as to what actually happened and what could be proved. I mean, I also think what's most likely is probably, and this is just my opinion, they really didn't care if Trump or Hillary won. I think they assumed Hillary would win, and so they wanted to muddy up the waters, which is why they placed that same internet research agency pushed all kinds of like pro Black Lives Matter stuff, pro LGBT stuff. After the election, they were personally responsible for starting rallies against Trump. So they just wanted to mess with the system. But I'm glad that you bring that up because this proves the actual contention of why we need to investigate all election interference. Because I will concede to you that if the hack did actually happen from Russia to the DNC and to Podesta's emails, that's a bigger deal than this IRA stuff. You would agree with
You don't
that?
believe you don't believe the investigation right now that points to Guccifer being directed by Russian sources hacking into the DNC. You don't think that investigation was good or that was proven?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm assuming it was proven. I'm always skeptical anytime that I don't personally see proof, whether it's to benefit my side or not. For example, I was skeptical. I think the worst thing Trump's done in his administration was bombing Syria. Now I think we're seeing credible evidence that it turns out the chemical attack wasn't as it was seen. But I was skeptical of that information from the intel community. I'm not saying that it's wrong, though. I'll take them at word, and I'll say that, to me, is obvious. All I'm saying is that's a step beyond these Russian trolls, right? Like, I think we could agree with that. The idea of hacking Hillary or her campaign manager's email is a bigger deal to me than 12 Russian trolls posting memes.
Sure. I don't like how you phrased the last thing. I think the last thing is still pretty troubling. But yeah, the hack and the hack is also something that was I think with more evidence was stated to have been directed by the Kremlin. If you read those indictment logs.
That is what they found. So that is a difference between what was going on with the IRA and what's going on with the hacks. They can directly tie the hacks to the Russian government. So yeah, I will agree with you. Now again, I stand that I'm skeptical and ready to hear counter evidence, but I'm operating on the assumption that Mueller is right and that is actually what happened. That's the assumption and by the way, I'm by no means my Putin fan, and I think it is outrageous. If he hacked, I don't care if it was my candidate, a candidate that had nothing to do with an election, that's outrageous and should be investigated. But the reason I bring up the IRA point is, even with that, even with these Russian trolls, and no matter how severe, like, I'll admit that my bias is leading me probably to downplay what they did compared to what you would take on it. But the point is, this is proof that even Russian or even foreign interference of that level of just releasing dirt is worth investigating. We've been told it's a big deal and it led to indictments. So why would it be different all of a sudden in the Ukraine? Why would we allow Ukraine?
What is this Ukraine thing that we're talking about investigating? What are you referring to specifically now?
Sure. So, for example, we had a Financial Times August 2016 article where a parliamentarian named Sergei Lyshenko publicly admitted to working with the Anti-Corruption Network, which was set up with the help of the Obama administration. That's called the NABU. And what they did was they released this black ledger on details of Paul Manafort. And they released that. We now know through other articles that was in conjunction with a DNC operative named Alexandra Chalupa. But you could leave her out of it for now. Just know that parliamentarians in the Ukraine admitted to interfering in the election, releasing dirt, and they did so because they expressly said, we hate Trump. We think that he will be someone who's more willing to talk to Russia. Almost 90% of our politicians are on board with Hillary. That's election interference. You might say, well, good, Manafort sucked. But it's still interference. No one said the interference is allowed if it's truthful.
People are saying that this same guy was fired for corruption and later retracted these claims. Is that true or not?
That's not anything about that. If I could clear that up, that's not true. This person's name is a man by the name of Lesh.
Hey, hold on, your mic. Hold on, your mic keeps cutting out. Sorry, go on.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Yep. This man's a man by the name of Leshchenko, Leshchenko.
Yep.
Lutsenko was a former prosecutor. That's someone that they're saying was corrupt. I have quibbles with that as well, but I'm not talking about Lutsenko. I'm talking about Leshchenko. And if you look up Financial Times, it might be behind a paywall, but Financial Times, Leshchenko, Leshchenko, it'll come up, and you can see his public admission. This is August.
Okay, wait, real quick. I just want to see real quick if these are actually two separate people.
Sure.
Because I haven't read anything. I really don't care about this impeachment stuff that much. But He's literally talking about Ukrainian officials talking shit about Trump. That's what he's referring to when he says there was interference in the election. So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about like election interference when it comes to this Ukraine stuff?
So what they've admitted to doing, you can check out a Politico 2017 article or the Financial Times 2016. What they've admitted to doing was there was an ongoing investigation into this guy Yukановich. And you said it would be bad for Trump to bring this up because he was connected to Manafort. You're right about that. There was connections between Manafort and the previous president Yukановich. There's an ongoing investigation into him in 2016. Parliamentarians and investigators decided to, while this investigation was ongoing, illegally leak that information to the United States. Now, there's good evidence they leaked it with the help of a DNC operative named Alexandra Chalupa. But they publicly admitted to leaking this in August of 2016. That's official dirt as to official records they had. We now know that Mueller didn't even find that Black Ledger credible enough to use it in his indictments of Manafort. So it turns out it looks that it's highly skeptical that the dirt they released on Manafort was even true in the first place. But they publicly I'm not concerned. I agree with the audience that's bringing up. I thought the Republicans were absolutely stupid to bring up this point. Oh, well, some Ukrainian ambassador talked crap on Trump. Who cares? Trump probably deserves to have crap talked on him, and I don't have a problem with that at all. But actually releasing this evidence, which later turned out to not even be credible enough for Mueller to use for an indictment, that seems to be exactly what Trump was accused of working with a foreign government to
Okay. I'll look into this because I honestly just don't care about the impeachment shit that much. I'll look into this, but yeah, I just don't know about the facts of the matter for this. So.
Okay, well, hey, that's fair. I really appreciate it. If there was one other thing, I think this shows something endemic, though, that we see going on with these investigations, which is it seems that every time there's any kind of foreign interference that could have benefited the Democrats, that it seems that we brush that under the table. For example, what would you say was the biggest Russian interference into our election in 2016?
Probably the hacking of the DNC, but I don't care that much. I've never really cared that much about like impeachment stuff.
Okay, well, I guess would be a good vote. I would think that even more than that, though, you know that the dossier was sourced by Kremlin officials.
The dossier was sourced by Kremlin officials. I thought the dossier was originally worked on by, was it Christopher Steele?
Yes, and he had source A and source B. He admitted source A and source B are both Kremlin officials close to Putin. And that's where all of the allegations about Carter Page being in or Cohen being in Prague and Carter Page dealing with Russians to try to get gas shares in order to throw the election for Trump. That's where all of these accusations came from. We know for a fact the dossier was used to get a FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page, which in its own right is the biggest political scandal in the history of our country. That you used...
Okay. Do we have anything non-impeachment shit to talk about?
Well,
there are so many like crazy conspiracy theories regarding a lot of these claims that I have to go back and I did this stuff a long time ago, and man, dude, Republicans make up so much random shit when it comes to this. I have to go back and look all this shit up again, rather than just kind of like let you spin like a really crazy narrative. I need to get the facts of the matter straight again if I want to go back and have these conversations.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Is there anything like impeachment related that so we don't have to rely on like all this like crazy fucking shit to have a conversation? Or
sure. I don't think that was necessarily impeachment. If I'll just summarize it here real quick. All I'm trying to say is that I don't think it's debatable. I think that it's just out there. It's public fact that the Kremlin officials were behind this. Why aren't we investigating the Kremlin officials that their dirt was so effective that it led to a 3-year investigation that affect our elections? Like, it seems that...
First of all, the investigations didn't affect our elections. Trump was already elected. So that's a false narrative.
What affected the 2018 election?
Maybe not. We don't know that.
Well, but wait. Now, wait. Let me... In the interest of honesty, then, well, we could say that Trump talking about Biden, that election's not for a year from now.
We've never said that that's affected anything either.
Well,
you don't understand that, like, in order for it... No, it doesn't have to be. A quid pro quo doesn't require that the outcome is successful. It doesn't require that a blackmail or an extortion or anything actually works. None of that is required for it to be a quid pro quo. Maybe it doesn't have any impact whatsoever. But, like, regardless, like, if we want to talk about how upset we are that a potential investigation can affect an election, why were we so quiet when Hillary was constantly being bombarded with stuff related to Benghazi or emails? It seems like we never cared about it then, but now we do now. It's just like I don't know. I just don't care that much about the impeachment stuff.
But I agree.
And if anything, if we look at the polling, like all the Republicans are emboldened anyways when this investigation type of shit happens. Like, look at Kavanaugh. Like, the support for Kavanaugh grew in the wake of those investigations. The support for Trump has actually grown after the testimonies of
Oop, I lost you.
investigations are actually hurting Trump.
Oh, you still there? I'm sorry.
Yep. Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Hello. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, no problem. No, I agree with you, but I'm not the one who was starting on the position of, oh, we should avoid investigations because they'll interfere with the election. That is an argument that the Democrats are making. I understand your more nuanced argument is that process.
I thought the argument that the Democrats are making right now is that there's just an investigation to see if Trump withheld foreign aid in exchange for favors from Ukraine against political opponents. It doesn't have to do with election interference.
Oh,
like,
no,
it might
no.
be a byproduct, but
No, if you listen to Schiff, all of their narrative coming out, it's not about they know they can't argue about the process or they'll be hypocrites because they know that the Obama administration also used a quid pro quo. So their specific argument is Trump did this in order to go against his biggest opponent in the 2020 election. This was to benefit Trump in the 2020 election. In fact, they specifically had many witnesses say they presumed that's what this was about, was helping Trump in the 2020 election. So I do respect that your position's more nuanced, and I actually think it's firmer ground to stand on. But no, the Democrats are making the argument this is all about the 2020 election. So I'm agreeing with you that I think that's nonsense. I don't think that should factor into our calculus. If there's a crime
I
to
don't know if
invest,
I agree with you there because I'm not sure if that's. Like, I don't know if
that's
that's
a good
the
try
main
on my
point.
part,
Like,
though, right?
it took a long time for Pelosi to come around on impeachment here.
Right.
So, but okay. All right. Well, hey, listen. Yep. I'll if we want, we can chat at like a later date about this, and I'll start doing all my reading right now so that I can get a hold on this. But man, what a waste of time! I don't know why like so much time is spent on the impeachment stuff. Like, it's a legal process. Like, it has to happen. It'll go down its route, or not a legal process, but a legal/political process. It'll go down its route. I don't know. It's just not something that interests me that much. But
That's fair enough. If you don't mind me asking, if I could take a couple more minutes of your time, who would be your preferred Democrat candidate?
Honest to God, I don't fucking know. I like Warren and Bernie because they're significantly to the left of me, and I feel like we need to scoot back in that direction. In terms of policies, Warren seems okay-ish. I don't know what Pete's policies are. He might be an okay guy, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends that are big Bernie supporters. I would say most of my left-leaning friends, that's where they come from. And I think that this kind of speaks what we were talking about, kind of transitions to that. I don't think that you'll ever see Bernie be able to have a legitimate shake because I feel that he's perceived as an outsider to kind of the establishment Democrats and the intel community as well. And I think that
he is an outsider. He's an independent, right? He just runs under a Democratic thing so that he has a chance of winning.
Right. I agree. And I don't think that he'll ever get a fair shot. I mean, I think you saw that with the story this week, if it's true, where Obama's kind of telling people, look, if Bernie starts to win, I'm going to publicly speak out about him. And I think
that was published by one source, and that was like, okay, so like, again, it's interesting that like all of the testimony relating to Trump like doesn't count because it was hearsay and hearsay and hearsay. But like one aide reported that he heard that Trump said that Obama said that he might speak out against Bernie if he got. I don't care about this story. I don't think this is a.
Well, fair enough. Even if that story, I guess, was just like a cherry on top of. I think you could see based on what happened in the 2016 election, and also I think by some of the treatment that you see from kind of the kind of more establishment wing of the Democratic Party, that I don't think Bernie ever has a shot. I think Elizabeth's kind of like Bernie light, where she's palpable. They could say, well, we could trust that when push come to shove, she'll kind of go along with the Pelosi's of the world and things like that. But
Bernie doesn't have a shot because Bernie's not popular enough in the Democratic Party to make it. That's why Bernie doesn't have a shot. It's not because the DNC is gatekeeping him. It's because the average Democrat is nowhere near as left-leaning as progressives like to think they are.
I mean, that's true. There's certainly some truth to that as well. But I think that Bernie actually had...
Wait, you're my kind of... I think that...
No, I think that there is a lot of truth to that. I think that we are led to believe that there is more progressives in the Democratic Party than there actually is. But I do think that Bernie would have had a far better shot in 2016 if kind of he wouldn't have been stymied by some kind of gatekeeper roadblocks that the Democratic Party threw up.
He might have had a bit of a better shot, but like he had no popularity with blacks. He was never making it through the South. That whole region was going to fuck him no matter what happened. He swung some of the later states, some of the Rust Belt states, but I don't think Bernie appealed enough to minorities back then to ever win it, regardless of the DNC's positioning around him.
I mean, maybe. I'm not being a Democrat. I guess I would default to people that maybe followed it closer than me. But what my concern is, more than I'm a Republican, I ran for Congress as a Republican. But I'm definitely more interested in the country and its success than I am any particular party. I think that you would agree with this. As someone who tries to think for yourself, you'll never find another person that totally agrees with you. So it goes to say you'll never find a party that totally agrees with you. So my worry is I just want to see politicians, even if I disagree with them, that would actually seem to care about the people they're representing. I might come to a different conclusion of how to best represent them, but my fear is we've had 30, 40 years of basically entrenched oligarchs of these same faces, and they think they know better than us, or they're just abusing their system. And I just think that us regular people no longer have a voice in the process, or at least not an effective one.
Wait, hold on. You said I think that us regular people.
We don't have an effective voice when it comes. Our vote basically, I mean, we get to choose from people that when it comes to the big things like bailing out bankers or a foreign regime change war, they all seem to agree on that stuff. In fact, if you turn
Then
on,
why if you're so important to have a guy representing you that represents your interests, why do you support a guy that's literally a billionaire? This guy is more disconnected from your lived experience than
yeah,
literally any other person running for Congress right now, or
because
running for president right now, except for
because
Steyer maybe,
yeah, Bloomberg has more than
and
Trump,
Bloomberg. Yeah.
but no, it's because it's not the individual character. For me, the reason I voted for Trump was quite simple. I feel that the establishment in both the right and the left, so the establishment Republicans and Democrats, basically control the show with business interests, with the intel community, unelected bureaucrats, and people like me and yours votes. And I mean everyone. I don't care if you're inner city, what your race, what your gender, your sexual preference. They don't really care about the average people anymore. Trump, I don't care if he was a good guy or a bad guy. What I knew about Trump was this: it would PO those people that are currently running the show, and it would force them to out themselves that they don't really care about the elections. They don't really care about the will of the people. They're going to do whatever they want. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what you've seen with these investigations, the Russia investigation, not the idea of investigating Russian meddling. That's totally reasonable.
Sure. So getting away from the weird conspiracy theory
Sure.
impeachment shit, Trump hasn't done fuck all to help the average American. All he's done is he's helped the same rich people and entrenched the Washington deeper into the swamp than it ever has been. Like, how has he done anything to fight the establishment? How many like different people have like been fired or left his administration or resigned? He fights with his own appointees. You know, he fought with fucking Sessions. You know, how is he doing any better than any other career politician?
I think he's doing okay. I think that you're the number
metric.
Well, if I could explain just a moment.
Yeah, go for
I
it,
think
sorry.
no problem. I think this is a great discussion. I think that the best criticism of Trump is, and that he's 100% wrong, and he brags about this, is you're absolutely right. He has appointed some of the worst people possible, like John Bolton. I mean, Trump basically ran on the idea that he's tired of these foreign regime change wars. Like, he was like, why aren't we working with Russia to fight Al Qaeda? I was like, yes, that's a great point. And then you appoint John Bolton? Or you say you're going to drain the swamp and you appoint Paul Manafort? So you're absolutely right to call him out in that. I don't think that that's Trump's corruption, though. I think that's two things. That's Trump's stupidity. And I'm not one of these like Q people, or I think Trump's playing 4D chess. I think Trump wins because he has the good fortune to be going against some of the least intelligent political operatives of all time in the establishment Democratic Party. But yeah, so he surrounded himself with terrible people, and he's constantly fighting this battle where no one has people in their own administration that's been against them as much as Trump has. And when you factor that in with the fact that basically the entire establishment mainstream media is against him, establishment academia is against him, it makes it difficult for him to get people around him that he could trust. Part of that's his fault, as I fully admit, though.
Do you think it might be that he's just fucked up a lot?
It could be. That's
like when his
certainly
own attorney general has to recuse himself for these investigations. Don't you think maybe Trump is like making a lot of fucking mistakes, and maybe that's why so many people in the government like don't like him right now? Also, there were some pretty big scandals under Obama. For instance, like Edward Snowden. That was under Obama, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't longer than 10. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like I mean, like so you or the Chelsea Manning, like,
Mhm.
or I don't remember if she was Chelsea Manning back then, but like I mean, so it's not like Obama's government was perfect insofar as like no leaks or anything, but I mean, when Obama is like, or I'm sorry, when Trump is literally like saying no more, you know, like White House press statements and anything. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think he does himself any favors. Like this idea that everyone is out to get him, and that's the reason why he makes these bad appointees or has these bad policies or doesn't understand anything about foreign policy or gives tax cuts to wealthy people. Like, I don't. What has he done that makes you think he's like representing your interests well?
Oh, okay, well, just real quick on that. Like with Sessions, I think that this is kind of this is where we end up, and you can say I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist. That's fine. I've been called worse, so I don't mind that. But I think this is where we see kind of two ships passing, because my argument is I feel that there's this establishment. You could call it what you want, and I don't mean
We
smoking
can call
people.
it the deep state. Is that what we're getting at? Go for
You
it.
can call it whatever. Yeah, sure. You call it deep state. I'm not talking like skull and bones, like John Kerry and George Bush wearing eye patches, smoking cigars and coffins. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that there are kind of business interests, unelected bureaucrats, along with these career politicians that kind of run the show and they don't care. Like, how many of us were for the bank bailout? Not many.
How many of us were for what? Your mic cut out. Sorry.
I'm sorry, the bank bailout. Not many of us, right?
Um, I mean, we kind of had to be, but yeah.
I mean, but it was unanimous amongst these people. That's just an example.
Wait, oh god, can you set your threshold like lower or something so that because your mic keeps cutting out at the end of like a lot of your sentences.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me.
That's okay.
That might fix it. Maybe it's just my whiny voice too. But yeah. I just think that
Yeah, so like the bank bailouts, I mean, like they worked, right? Like our major institutions didn't fail. Like all the loans were paid back. We avoided a massive collapse of the United States economy, and we made like a pretty miraculous recovery within a decade, like a pretty unbelievable one considering the extent that like the world was impacted by that financial collapse. So,
but what lesson was learned? We've just inflated a bubble that's going to burst in the future, and then we'll have to bail out again.
Well, the lesson that was hopefully learned was that we should probably decouple some assets from each other. So, for instance, you probably shouldn't be able to make investments based on like mortgages. It's probably not a good idea.
But it's still happening.
Yeah, well, because we rolled back a lot of the protections that came from Dodd-Frank or whatever, which I think happened under Donald Trump.
I don't know specifically when they're rolled back, but I think we could both agree it didn't seem that Obama did much to stymie the season. I think it's a bipartisan.
Literally. Wait, is it Dodd-Frank or Glass-Steagall? It's Dodd-Frank. Glass-Steagall is what was rolled back before. Dodd-Frank was the new legislation came out. Dodd-Frank was supposed to make it so that, what was it? That investment banks, or that like banks, like depository banks, or whatever, that people like deposit money at, couldn't use those deposits for investments anymore. It was supposed to decouple that, which is what led to that housing bubble happening.
But that was prior to Trump, then, that it was rolled back. Was that rolled back under Bush then?
I think it was rolled back under Trump. No, Dodd-Frank happened under Obama, and I believe that some of those provisions were rolled back under Trump.
Okay, well, I'm ignorant of the specifics of it, so I really can't comment. All I'll say is I feel, and maybe you'll make fun of me for saying I feel if I don't have the specifics, but I feel that in 30 years of my life, what I've seen is kind of a bipartisan effort from Republicans and Democrats to benefit kind of shady practices from corporate banks. I think that maybe you had some specific individuals in either party that were fighting nobly to stop that, but it's been ineffectual. And I don't think that bailing out those bankers for a short-term fix was the right thing to do. I think that we should have took our medicine, let those banks go bankrupt. In fact, why not bail out?
Realize that like letting those banks go bankrupt could have led to like unforetold catastrophic collapse in the United States and around the world.
Well, it's funny because it's almost like you would think that I'm the leftist and you're the conservative.
Wait, hold on. Wait. I'm sorry. Can you turn your threshold or use push it example? You keep cutting out at like the end of a lot of your sentences.
Let me. Does this seem to be working better?
Yeah, right now.
Okay. I'll keep it on. No, I was just saying it seems like almost I'm arguing from the leftist point of view and you the conservative point of view, because like why couldn't we have spent that money, for example, to pay off people's mortgages as opposed to rewarding the banks when they gambled and they won, they got to keep the money. When they gambled and they lost, then we, the taxpayer, paid them out. But they still got that mortgage money.
Yeah, so, well, we don't want to pay out. First of all, they got money, but they paid it all back. It was a loan. They weren't just given money. They paid that money back with interest to the United States. Firstly, secondly, why would we give people money to keep those mortgages, to keep those houses, which would continue to inflate the housing market? Like that's probably something we don't want to do.
But by giving the money,
there's like no purpose to it. And also, that money would be lost. We wouldn't get that paid back like we did with the financial institutions that did pay that money back.
But what we did was we've incentivized that sort of behavior from happening again. For example,
well, that was the point of Dodd-Frank, was to make it so that kind of behavior can't happen again. That we made it so that investment banks can't double as like I think it's that you basically can't have a bank that takes like consumer deposits and then also go and invest that money in risky ways. So that's one of the things that Dodd-Frank was supposed to do.
I have to look up Dodd-Frank and exactly. For some reason I thought that this was previous to the Obama administration. But I'll take your word for it. I really will, and I'll look into it. But
Dodd-Frank was like 2010.
okay,
It happened after the housing collapse and everything.
so I'll look into that. I promise, and I'm not gonna argue anymore about it from a position of ignorance. My only point was, it seems that often that we see the big things, whether it be foreign regime wars, things like that. There seems to be bipartisan agreement, such as the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, the situation in Libya, the situation in Yemen. All of those seem to have bipartisan support. The only time I could recall seeing MSNBC or CNN or any news outlet praise Trump was when he was dropping bombs on Syria. Like, that should worry us that we don't have people representing our views. That's not to say that some of these wars couldn't have been correct, but there seems to be no counter voice. It seems that that's what I'm talking.
Counter voice to what?
The idea
Or
that
what?
when it comes to these things like foreign regime change wars, bailing out big bankers, or like illegal immigration would be one.
So bailing out big bankers is something that every American would support if they knew what the like catastrophic impact would be had all those institutions collapsed. Like that would have echoed throughout the entire world economy, let alone the US one, if we would have allowed all of those institutions to just absolutely collapse. Like there would be a massive credit freeze, there would be zero liquidity for average consumers in the US. Like it would be unforetold disaster would occur if we would have allowed everything to just collapse in on itself in 2007.
Well, if do you think Bernie would agree with that?
Of course not.
Right. So if then,
But I don't support any of Bernie's economic policies because
okay,
Bernie is a protectionist, and I disagree with almost everything he says economically. He probably aligns pretty closely with Trump on a lot of things related to this. But
okay, and Warren as well would have probably been against the bank bailouts.
probably because she aligns a lot with Bernie as well.
So it just, I mean, I'm just pointing out that a big part of why they're running and the success that they're having, as far as like grassroots implication, is their economic policies. So if you're admitting they would have been for disastrous economic policies that would have crushed the United States, that seems problematic for wanting to vote for them, I would think.
Well, I don't think they'll get any of their. I don't think they'll get any of their agenda passed, and I would hope not. But yeah, economically, I'm aligned almost completely against a lot of what these guys want: nationwide rent control, banning of all private health insurance, massive protectionist policies that are currently being enacted by Trump. So things like huge tariffs, taxes placed on the American people for importing goods, things that like make it hard. Just yeah, all of these types of policies, I'm generally against economically.
So what?
But
So
this
it's their foreign policy that you're for?
No, I just think that we've moved pretty far right in the country, and it'd be nice to like move a little bit back to the left in terms of like for social issues. I support most of what they say. So when it comes to things like Supreme Court justices, I'm pretty big on not having more conservatives in there and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But none of this really speaks at all to like why do we like Trump?
Okay,
Like what has Trump done?
So the point I was making with this is I feel that Trump was seen as a potential outsider that would out the kind of rot and corruption, not because he's smart or he would do things in a virtuous way, but because the other side couldn't help it. I mean,
That's what we saw him as, but what has he actually done?
Well, he's done exactly that. For example, we know that the mainstream media is just a propaganda mouthpiece. We know that the establishment is willing to do anything whatsoever, including launching investigations.
Okay, wait. So, aside from weird MSN or MSM conspiracy or whatever, what has Trump himself actually done?
Okay, so that's the number one reason I voted for him, was to out that corruption. But what has he actually done? I think that he was right that he's at least trying to push us in a direction to end these foreign regime change wars. Unfortunately,
we've bombed and killed more people under him in Yemen than we ever have like in U.S. history with drone strikes. He still approved the arms sales to other Gulf states like Saudi Arabia. It was like a $500 billion sales and jets and shit. So like, how?
I don't think
what has he done to end regime change? He still bombed Syria when he blew one of their airports up.
That's absolutely correct. I don't think he's bombed more in Yemen than Obama did, but nonetheless, your point's taken. Yeah, I agree. But he still pushes for that narratively sometimes, and I agree that's not good enough. But what's the alternative? Tulsi Gabbard? That'd be about it, right? I mean, the Democrats at this point are the party of war. I mean, Hillary wanted no-fly zones in Syria. That would have led to a direct military confrontation with Russia. And it seems that oftentimes, even when Trump just...
Okay, real quick.
Sure.
I'm sorry, just because I have like a platform and I know about this stuff, so I have to make sure that I'm correct on this.
Sure.
Um, in one respect, President Trump has no doubt kept his word. Trump promised during his campaign to, quote unquote, bomb the shit out of ISIS, and it appears to be one of the few promises he's kept. Trump inherited from Obama an escalating war against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but both conventional bombing and drone strikes have significantly increased under Trump as a result of his new ISIS battle plan, whose strategy Defense Secretary James Mattis defines as annihilation tactics. According to Newsweek, the United States under Trump has dropped a record number of bombs in the Middle East, roughly 10% more than under his predecessors. Trump also loosened rules of engagement that protect civilians, and unsurprisingly, civilian casualties from the U.S.-led war against ISIS will, at this pace, double under Trump. Like, and then I could go and look for it, but I'm pretty sure that like the number of civilian casualties and the number of drone strikes that we've done on Yemen has like outpaced like the entire Obama administration's foreign drone strikes. But I mean, we don't even have to appeal these specifically. Like we've seen that Trump has like engaged in a lot of like quasi hawkish like foreign policy actions. So where is this idea that Trump is like helping us in terms of foreign policy?
Well, I do think that there's different types. Like, I don't mind a battle against, like, I'm not going to say that we should never drop bombs on ISIS or Al Nusra or Al Qaeda. That to me seems to be different than like overthrowing Libya. Yemen's a different situation, and if you find anything on Yemen that you'd be interested in sending me, I would love to read that. And again, I'll listen to you on that. I haven't read those numbers, but I don't mind dropping bombs on ISIS or trying to wipe out ISIS, Al Qaeda, Al Nusra. It's the idea that we should go in and overthrow Assad. We should have overthrown Gaddafi. We should go in Iraq and overthrow Saddam. We should go in Afghanistan and overthrow these countries. Where ends in these.
Okay, so do you have problems with like with Trump supporting the opposition to Maduro in
Yes,
Venezuela, or
yes, I
okay, do
absolutely
you have
do.
problems with Trump supporting the new elections? Um, the new elections after Evo Morales left.
In Bolivia,
Yeah, in Bolivia.
I
Like, are
I
these okay or?
I with Bolivia, I have to plead ignorance in that I haven't followed that news cycle. With Maduro, I did follow more, and my feeling is that we should basically keep our nose out of the situation unless there is
Yeah,
clear
I
cut.
understand your
Okay,
opinion,
sure.
but it seems like Trump isn't doing any of this. It seems like foreign policy as usual for the United States. So
Okay,
where am I supposed to see Trump as like doing your more isolationist view on foreign
well, he
policy?
tried to pull out of Afghanistan. He tried to pull out of Syria. Both of those were led to huge efforts by the Democrats and their allies to say that these were horrible mistakes. And so, again, I don't think my criticism of Trump
Okay,
is,
and oh, wait, Obama pulled out of Iraq. I mean,
oh, okay,
so
yeah, but nonetheless,
well,
he
no, no,
didn't
I don't think
pull.
that trying to pull out of two areas, Syria, of which we have a very loose involvement with, which is already falling apart completely under Obama, and then Afghanistan, which would arguably be a mistake, but we'll say that that's okay.
Okay,
He's trying to pull out of Afghanistan. I don't know if he's made any progress there. These are two actions and a drop, like drops in the bucket of all the other like foreign policy blunders. You would call them blunders that he's continued to make that other past presidents do as well.
right, but I still think he's preferable than what we'd see under anyone in the Democratic Party, except maybe Tulsi. But there's a lot of things wrong with Tulsi that wouldn't merit voting for her anyways. Like I'm agreeing with you that I think when it comes to Trump's actual actions, he's left a lot to be desired on the foreign policy front. But I think his gut reaction was correct to try to pull us out of these quagmires. It's just there is near universal acceptance of we need to stay in these countries. And Trump, with all of the stuff he's fighting back home, finds it impossible to have the political capital to be able to go out on his own and pull away from these things.
Okay, so then aside from his inability to get anything done on a foreign policy front, and we're not even talking about what I would consider to be his blunders, but you'd probably consider them successes. So like pulling out of the Iran nuclear agreement, I'm thinking you think that's a good thing, or
I don't know. I mean, my question with that, which I've never seen a Republican answer, is we already gave them the money, so what good's pulling out? I, right? Does that make sense to you?
well, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I figured that was one of his worst foreign policy blunders
Yeah,
of
I
all time.
don't.
I don't know where I mean.
I think that he's right to criticize the initial deal, but I really don't understand how pulling out after we, right? Because the idea was if we give them this money, they'll do bad things with it and still build bombs. Okay,
Well,
well, we
unfreezing. To be fair, it's unfreezing assets that are already theirs. We didn't just pay them money, but
Right, right. Well, we did send them money, pallets of cash in the middle of the night, but the argument is legally we owed them that money, I believe
well,
is
that
the
it was
argument.
their money. It was just
Right.
assets the U.S. had frozen.
Yeah.
I take issue with the framing of flying them money in the middle of the night, like it wasn't an official part of the deal that was publicly stated. But okay,
Well, regardless, that's what happened. But you're right. It was technically money that we'd frozen and that a court had ruled that they were
hmm
entitled to get back. That is true. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm making a point that's anti-Trump here, which is just I do agree with you. I think both sides do this. They want to defend their side so much that they don't bother to explain to maybe people like me or maybe like you. I don't know that. You're interested in the truth aside from who you're trying to defend. So I've yet to hear one Republican tell me, "Well, we already gave them the money, so what?
What
What
about
can?"
in terms of like Assad and dethroning Assad? What
Mhm.
about this idea of Trump trying to put more troops in Syria to take over Syrian oil? How do you feel
Terrible,
about that?
terrible idea.
Okay, so it seems like Trump doesn't have a very good track record when it comes to foreign policy. What about domestic policy?
Well,
Like,
well, again, I mean, it's you have to say foreign policy compared to what? It's not in a vacuum. I mean, so compared to the establishment Democrat policy?
well, sure, I can compare foreign policy compared to Obama that wasn't giving photo ops to, North Korean leaders and was trying to like head Iran in a direction that would normalize relations with them.
But
Would be
those two things are
huge.
counterintuitive, right? Like on one hand, and Republicans do the same thing. I don't understand how those two arguments jive. On one hand, Trump's an idiot for trying to have relations with North Korea, but on the other hand, Obama was the man for trying to do so with Iran. I mean, it
Yes,
seems
because Obama, when we did so with Iran, we did it under the agreement that we would have like 24/7 surveillance over some nuclear areas, that the UN would have unrestricted access with some warning given to peruse and go through different nuclear facilities. Like, yeah, that was a really good deal that was set up. With Trump, he basically just like winked at Kim and was like, yo, you'll be cool on the nuclear shit, right? And he was like, yeah, take a picture with me. It'll look awesome for my Instagram. And then he ran back to North Korea and went right back to work on his missiles. He was back to work on missile testing. These two things are totally incomparable. If
right.
Trump had actually made real progress on North Korea, I would look like a huge idiot. And I would have eaten. I would have been glad to have been an idiot there. Like, man, actually Trump made real progress in North Korea, but he didn't. He gave a photo up to Kim, and then Kim went back to building bombs.
But what did Trump give up? A picture?
He legitimized Kim on a world stage, and he
That
undermines U.S. presence on a world stage. Yeah, it's important to
that's I
how
disagree.
legitimate. Okay, I
I
mean,
mean,
at the very least, we can agree that he didn't accomplish much, and he just looked kind of stupid and naive. But
I
I
mean,
guess
it's
Trump already looks
ongoing.
stupid and naive, so he doesn't really look much worse there.
It's ongoing, but I'll concede with you that surely he's blown way out of proportion his progress there. I think that, but I mean, certainly it's ongoing. I mean, we did get corpses back, correct? Which was
I don't
something that
fucking care about bodies. I care about future bodies.
okay, but you
Trump
care
got
about
zero concessions from North Korea. We got a lot of concessions from Iran.
yeah, but you care about a picture, but you don't care about families getting the blood. I'm just saying, it
I
seems
care
like
about a picture because a picture like legitimizes, like Kim Jong Il got a lot of like legitimacy on like the world stage, like being able to meet with a U.S. president like that. It made him look really good. It empowered North Korea by quite a bit. I'm sure those pictures are going to be circulated for propaganda purposes for the next fucking 20 decades, however long North Korea survives. And then North Korea went right back to work on their fucking program. I don't care that much about the picture. I just think it's kind of dumb. But I sure as fuck don't think that it's good to get some bodies back to be buried on American soil. Like, and this is a part of a larger scheme of like Trump destroying relationships with U.S. allies anywhere
I don't I
or
don't
anyway.
I don't think that's I think that Trump realizes that these egomaniacs like Putin and Kim Jong Un, the best way to deal with them is to just be like, oh yeah, you guys are doing all right. I understand you. Whereas the best way to deal with our allies is to be like, look, we've been your ally. We think you should work harder to help the United States or to help international regimes as opposed to just leaving the US take care of everything. I don't think that's, you might disagree with that strategy, but I don't think that it's immoral or comes without any merit whatsoever. Like you push the people closest in your life, sometimes it's worth it to push them harder and people that you don't really know or that you think maybe he's a crappy person, like a boss or something that you have to deal with, maybe you deal with them in a more polite way than you otherwise would. I don't know. I mean, you might disagree, but I don't think that it's totally without merit.
Wait, what? So what? So what is the strategy? I'm sorry, fuck. I just something
No, that's
like blew
okay.
over my screen. What? So what is the strategy that you're saying that Trump is employing right now, and how do we see that it's effective?
So, like, the Obama strategy seemed to be, I think Obama shared Trump strategy to some point where he thought that sometimes it's worth to have a dialogue with your potential enemies. For example, he spoke to people in Russia. You know, we know that Obama did that. We know that he spoke with people in the Iranian regime, etc. I think the difference is when it comes to our allies. I think Trump then takes a different tactic than Obama. Obama took the tactic of like, we're here for you, we'll do anything you want. Where Trump takes the tactic of, look, we feel that you've been getting a free ride. You've not been pulling your weight with our relationship, and we'd like you to pull your weight more. I don't think that's a strategy without merit. I think that unless you press
It
them
would
at some point,
it
sorry.
without I don't want to get into like all the alliances so much, but like the problem is that like that strategy completely ignores the purpose of these institutions. Like NATO doesn't exist so that like we can get money from allies to like set up like defense funds or whatever for them. Like all of this is this. I don't understand how you think it's a good thing that like so many allies around the world have declared that the United States is like less reliable than it used to be, or is less credible than it used to be, or that our word doesn't mean as much as it once did. I don't see how that could be a good thing.
But what were those allies doing to help like the average person in the United States?
It's not about helping the average person in the United States. It's about helping foreign policy directives of the United States. It's about having our back, about whether it's supplying troops, whether it's organizations like Five Eyes that helps us share intel with each other,
Mhm.
whether it's, being able to set up air bases or transfer military troops or weapons through these countries. Like there's a lot of different things that are helped by having these allies.
Yeah, but like for example, we know that when it came to like giving financial and troop incentives to organizations like NATO, that all of them were missing their declared mark. The United States
Yeah,
is
but
filling that void. Same with the UN.
Yeah,
So
because the United States doesn't really care if they hit their mark or not. NATO isn't about bringing in countries and them paying money for us to blah blah. It was about the United States expanding its foreign influence. That's the whole point. We don't really care that much if they pay their money. We don't care if countries like Estonia are contributing enough to the military fund. I mean, yeah, they should be, but like the idea of threatening to destroy NATO because some small countries aren't contributing, an extra few $100 million to some military fund, completely and totally like betrays a misunderstanding of why NATO even exists.
but
And
it,
it's
how
to
of
extend U.S. influence. Sorry, go.
no, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be speaking of it.
No, no, you're good.
How effective is our influence if they won't even meet the obligations they've signed on to? Clearly, they have no respect for our country. Then they assume, oh, you're our friend no matter what. So hey, we're a little short in the rent this month, no big deal. And it's not just Estonia. This is true of first world countries like the
Yeah,
UK,
the
France,
idea
Germany.
is the idea is that they remain like strong U.S. allies. I mean, I think that like getting funding is good if that's part of our agreement. I just don't like the way that like I don't think we have to make countries hate us to do this.
Maybe, but maybe it's like a good cop, bad cop thing. And when it comes to like having allies, what would you expect your ally to do? Like, I still think even under Trump, like God forbid China or Russia attack us, I think that our allies would continue to meet the obligation. I don't think they'd be like, well, we find Trump such a boorish character that we're not gonna, live up to our alliances. I just don't think it's been damaged that much.
Okay, I mean, I guess we'll see when it comes to negotiating future agreements or whatever if that has had any negative impacts with the U.S. and its position in the world. But
All right, but that's I guess my nature on foreign policy, domestic policy. I do think that
okay,
Trump.
so wait, to be clear, so for foreign
Uh-huh.
policy, you say Trump really hasn't done much good, but it probably wasn't as bad as it would have been under the Democrats.
And I do give some credence, though. I agree with you, the buck stops with Trump, but I do give some credence to the fact that there's so much establishment pressure that this is the way foreign policy is done, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican, that it's hard for him to surround himself with people that won't fall into that same criteria. But yes, that's basically what I have to say
Okay.
about foreign
So
policy.
domestic wise, what has he done to help the average American?
I think that the tax cut is incredibly mischaracterized by many people on the left. That it was just a bailout for wealthy people. The research shows, even from as recently as a New York Times article, that 60% of Americans actually got more money back. Now, that's not to say that it's a great that this is a super awesome thing that I brag about. But I noticed you said we bailed out his rich friends. That's not accurate. Like most people did get it. More than 60% of the
So
country
I don't
got
think it was a
money.
bailout. And yeah, 60% of the country might have got money back, but the majority of it went to wealthy Americans.
Well, anytime that you have the majority, like just look at it this way: if most taxes are being paid by Group X, and then you have a tax cut, then yes, Group X will probably save more money. Will
Well,
pay
you could
less in
target the tax
taxes.
cuts. You could target the tax cuts towards poor people.
I mean, I suppose, but I'm for lowering taxes across the board in general. Actually, I'm probably for more of a flat tax.
Sure. Okay. Well, so Trump gave a lot of money to wealthy people in the U.S. What did we do for poor people and middle class people?
Well,
Besides give them a little bit of money.
I think that undoubtedly the GDP's gone up more than expected. I mean, you had people like Krugman.
GDP doesn't mean anything to an average worker.
Oh, that's true. Though it's funny you bring that up because I've heard you talk about GDP in a past debate, and that's what I was telling myself. But you are right about that.
Well, I mean, I talk about GDP in terms of like overall the economy should grow, but
Right.
GDP growth on its own or stock market growth on its own, that's like that can be one economic indicator, but it doesn't tell you how like a middle class or lower class person's life is actually going. We have to look at other metrics for that.
Well, sure. And so I think you could look at like employment. We see that actually for the first time wages have gone up, though woefully so. But in like the past 20 years, we've seen slight increases in wages. We've seen large increases in employment numbers, particularly with communities that oftentimes we see had been struggling with employment numbers.
Sure, but I don't think Trump has done much for this, right? The global economy is chugging along. America was exploding, had explosive growth since 2008. After the collapse, like America just started growing like crazy again on the backs of like all of the monetary policy and everything. I
I,
mean, it
I
happened
don't
a fuck
know
ton on what?
if I could partially agree with you. I don't know how much of it's Trump's fault, but I think it's incredibly generous to say the economy was growing like crazy after 2008. It was one of the slowest recoveries we've ever had during Obama's tenure.
What?
Yeah, absolutely, that's true. The
In
growth.
5 years, we were posting all-time highs again on the stock market. If you go and look up the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, starting in 2013, we start 5 years after one of the worst financial collapses worldwide, we started posting all-time highs again in our stock markets.
Yeah, but
What do you mean it
again,
was?
that's but like you just said, GDP doesn't help the average worker. Well, certainly the stock market doesn't. Probably even
Well,
less
no,
so
yeah, no,
than
no, but I'm just
GDP.
saying that like to say that it was a slow recovery in,
It,
in what metric?
I mean, it was a slow recovery as far as GDP numbers, as far as job growth numbers, and things like that. At the end of Obama's term, the amount of our numbers for things like unemployment and that were nowhere near where they are today. Now,
That's
again,
not true. If you look at so right now, if we were to look up U3 unemployment, United States, if you go back to 2008, you're going to see a steady decline that's continued all the way from Obama's presidency all the way through Trump's presidency today. It's not like it was like fucked under Obama and then it massively like surged to great numbers under Trump. Like it was just doing really well after the recession and everything happened. As soon as we started enacting the bailouts and all the other things, like the economy continued to grow, like unemployment fell, and that trend just continued through Trump. Like,
I mean, GDP was averaged since 2009, averaged 2% by the time of the Obama administration. Obama said that there's no way we could get that's the new government or that's the new country, the new US. We wouldn't see over 2% GDP growth. Now,
mhm.
it's we will have to see under Trump what the numbers end up as, but certainly we've seen quarters where we've had upwards of 3.5, I believe, GDP growth. Again, these numbers, I will totally concede with you two things. I don't know how much Obama and Trump directly have to do with those numbers. And second, what does that mean to me and you and people? GDP is not the end of the world, neither is the stock market. But I do think that the numbers bear out that the recovery under Obama was not a booming recovery. Now, you could say there were mitigating factors, but I don't think that anyone in good faith could argue that it was like a booming thing. I just don't think that.
I would I actually totally reject this assertion. I think it was an amazing recovery. The fact that like people were predicting a second Great Depression, and in 5 years, like for the most part, the economy like came back. Obviously, there are a lot of groups that were affected individually through more complicated means, but like there were sectors of workers, so like people in manufacturing and whatnot, that got impacted like pretty negatively. But in terms of the survival and the strength of the U.S. economy, I think most economists would say that the recovery we made like post 2007 was insane. But
I mean,
I don't know. I'm gonna have to.
I guess I would have to look at more data. I mean, the data I've looked at, I mean, I think he averaged like 160,000 jobs each month, which isn't a very good number. I thought that it was like average below 2 GDP. The stock market did reach record highs, but even with Trump supporters, this is something you need to. By the way, this is a mistake Trump makes. When he talks about the stock market being a measure of how good he is, well, you got to take the bad with the good then. So if the stock market declines, I'm not going to listen to Trump come out all of a sudden and say, oh, well, it's not my fault the stock market's declining. Well, hey, that's the game you play. When you attach the stock market to your presidency, you take the good with the bad. So, I don't, I think that it's
I don't
misleading.
think it should be, but that's why I'm asking. Like, I'm looking.
Uh,
That's why my question is like, what policies? Don't just tell me like job growth has happened. Like, what has Trump actually done to like instigate any of this?
well, I think that the tax cuts did lead to job growth. I think that that's a direct reflection of we see when you give people more money in their pockets, they're able to hire more people, which leads to increased job growth. And I think that we're seeing that particularly in communities that under Obama, and not just Obama, under Bush as well, under the first Bush, under Reagan, communities that oftentimes struggled with employment numbers. They seem to be benefiting the most from Trump's policies. So
Do you think?
go ahead,
Do
sorry.
you think that deficit spending in general is a good thing,
No,
or would
it's
you criticize?
that's terrible. That's another thing that Trump's done horribly wrong. But
Well, because
again,
I was going to say, if we were to say that the tax cuts were essentially just a lot of like stimulus that Trump gave to the economy via deficit spending, no?
I mean, I guess it's kind of a nuance and it's how you define things. I don't think allowing people to keep more of their money is deficit spending. I think like
So when you
quantitative
create a
easing
federal,
is deficit spending.
So when you create like a federal budget
Uh-huh.
and you take in less tax receipts than you spend,
Mhm.
it's a deficit spending. If you decrease the amount of tax receipts you get, you're increasing the deficit by letting people keep their money. Like it's literally deficit spending. You're
Trump
increasing the deficit to fund the economy. That's what Trump was doing, right?
Trump did deficit spend, but it wasn't. I guess we're just arguing. I'm agreeing with you. Trump did deficit spend. I won't quibble. I say that to my Trump supporting friends all the time. I say, I could probably get the economy going too if you let me just print $1 trillion. I could probably do an okay job as well. But the idea is, I don't think cutting taxes is a bad thing. I think we need to rein in our spending. That's the problem. And so when the problem with Republicans historically is they want to cut taxes but not rein in spending. The problem with the Democrats is they want to increase spending but not raise taxes, right? And so ultimately, both sides are doing the same thing from a different angle. The Republicans are saying, well, we'll keep programs where they are, but you get to keep more of your money. And the Democrats are saying, well, we won't affect taxes, but we're going to increase spending. We're going to have this cool program, free healthcare, this and that. So both are wrong. But I'm just saying, I do think that the tax cuts, that portion of it, Trump got right. Now, it will create a bubble in the future if we don't decrease spending. But I don't see either party doing that.
Okay, sure. It's interesting that like we're almost at $1 trillion budget deficit in
Yep.
2019 under Trump, and
It's
I don't
nuts.
know.
It is nuts. And as someone who ran as a Republican, you were oftentimes expected to just defend the Republicans and Trump, and that's nonsense. I don't see how anyone who was in the Tea Party and criticizing Obama for his budget is going to sit silent on what Trump's doing. I think
Our
that's
budget
unconscious,
deficit has almost doubled
right?
since 2015 under Obama.
I
I don't
agree.
know.
I agree 100% with you. It's hypocritical for anybody who had a problem with Obama's budget spending to say, well, it's okay when Trump does it. And maybe to endear myself a little more to you, I agree with the exact same thing when it came to like executive power and emergency funding with the wall. Why would I
Mhm.
want my guy? My entire argument is there's too much executive power. So I don't want, just because someone I voted for is finally in office, I don't think he should be allowed to use that emergency spending, even though I'm for the wall. I think that that's a huge mistake because then I am a hypocrite if, say, Elizabeth Warren wins and she says, oh, okay, well, I'm going to emergency spend on climate change or on gun violence. Now all of a sudden you'll see Trump supporters howling, this is unfair, this is an abuse of power. So we should hold our own party and the people we support their feet closer to the fire than the people we disagree with, I think. So on those two
Sure.
issues, yeah, I'm totally with you. But I do think the tax cuts were the right thing to do. He's just missing the cutting spending. Because unfortunately, we live in a society where it's a political loser for you to come out and say, yeah, we have to cut spending. No one wants to do it because they know that you're going to affect some group that gets that money and they're not going to vote for you. So what
What kind
we
of spending should he cut to like pay for these massive tax cuts?
I think that our military budget spending is out of control when it comes to overseas base things like so. Basically, I guess economically, I'm kind of more of a Ron Paul supporter, where I think we could cut a lot of meat from military spending. Though I actually believe we should.
Let's imply that we cut a little bit of military
Okay,
spending. Okay, we
okay,
spend 600 billion annually on our military. Our
yeah,
budget deficit is $1 trillion.
right.
Are you just going to defund literally the entire military? Because even if you
No,
did,
no,
you're still only halfway through our deficit.
right, right. You're absolutely right, and that's one of the
And
big
then
problems.
when you cut all this funding to defund all of these foreign bases, what do you do with all the vets then that have no jobs now?
But okay, so I what I was going to say is I think that you bring them back and you employ them on works projects in the United States. I actually don't have a problem with making sure that we're paying our actual people. I don't care if you serve in active wartime or not. If you volunteer to serve, you should never have to pay another medical bill your entire life. And the amount of money and options you're getting for loans and things like that should be increased above
So
what they
you're
already are.
literally asking you're going to Green New Deal me. You're asking for like a
No.
federal jobs guarantee for veterans, for people that we because now all the money that you're spending on your military should have them in bases. Well, now you're just going to be spending that money from the government, employing them on whatever pet projects you give them in the U.S. No, how
Well,
is that going
no.
to cut
What?
spending?
No. That's it's not a federal jobs guarantee. They're still an active member of the military, and like we
Oh,
have
so you
some.
just have how you just going to bring all these people home and have them active military like on U.S. soil?
Well, like we have all sorts of infrastructure programs that they could get involved with. Because remember, we have less
Do you think people
actual.
that join like the Navy and the Army and the Air Force are going to want to go to work like building bridges in the U.S.?
I mean, my friends that served in Afghanistan would have damn sure rather been here building bridges than over there fighting a meaningless war. I think that overall most would be for it. And I also
Yeah, but
think
we're not talking about like active deployed troops into combat zones.
right,
We're talking about people that might be deployed to bases in like Okinawa, Japan,
Germany,
or
right.
Germany, or yeah, like
Yeah, I
these
think
people are going to come.
yeah, I absolutely
Okay.
think you could. I think that another thing we see that leads to that maybe speaks to that is I think there is a less percentage of people in our military that are actually designed for combat roles now than any point in history. So we're actually seeing a military that's incredibly diverse in terms of skill set. So engineers, we're seeing computer technicians and things like that. Those are all things that we could be putting to work. I think one for ensuring the defense of our country, which was the idea in the first place, but second to help with things like infrastructure. But I do concede your point that that by no means is enough to rein in all of the
Yeah, and
spending.
also it seems like our spending saving here is going to be like incredibly minimal.
Sure.
Like, because if you're bringing these people back and then doing like infrastructure rebuilds and all that, like you're not actually saving any money at all. We're just spending the same amount of money in a different area now.
That I do think that there would be a savings of money, but I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I know exactly how much or how significant that'll be. So
Okay,
suffice it to
so
say, I will admit that it probably would be a minimal savings. I would
sure.
say
So
that's
maybe we save a few. Maybe we save 10 billion there. So
okay.
now 990 billion to go. What
Yeah,
else are we cutting from?
I think we have to start cutting from where's the biggest slice of the pie? It's entitlements. I mean,
So
you
like Social
yeah,
Security and like Medicare.
yeah, we're going to have to start cutting some sorts of programs like that. Yes, it's inevitable. For example, I don't know
So
how old you are, but Social Security will be gone by the time that me and you,
I
because it's
don't
been
think that's true. But
no,
like
it's been
that you
robbed. It's
that's the road you want to go down to help America is cutting things like Social Security and Medicare.
we will have to do something. There will have to be difficult decisions like that made. I think that you triage it. You try to look at the most vulnerable people and keep them on these programs as long as possible. But
So literally then to fund American tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, we ought to cut Social Security and Medicare. That's the connection we're making here.
well, no, because that's not what it's doing. It's not funding tax cuts. It's in order to allow people to keep more of their money. When people keep more of their money, it does all sorts of things. Like it leads to job creation, which means people would have more money, which means they'd be less reliant on things
Well,
like these
so
programs.
when rich people keep their money, it doesn't lead to job creation. Rich people don't create jobs because they have more money. They create jobs usually when there's a demand in the economy for a product, right? So rich people keeping their money doesn't really lead to job creation, I don't think.
Well, yeah,
And
it's
then,
certainly it does. I mean, that's proven. What? Why do you think that
well, I
jobs
don't
are
think it's proven. I think trickle down
okay?
has been criticized heavily, repeatedly by literally every economist in the history of all of mankind as like
Nah,
a joke ideology.
that's not true. But I will say that it's unfair of me to say it's proven. But I think that your statement there is hyperbolic. But how do you explain job creation under? Let's say it's not Trump, right? We know that the job creation numbers have been good under this administration. So we'll say, okay, it's not because of Trump. Why do you think the numbers have been so good?
Just because like globalism, baby. I mean, as we continue to trade with more people, as we continue to create more products, as we continue to open our economy up, economies have just kind of grown. The less you fuck with it, the more that it kind of grows on its own. Yeah.
That's exactly right. The less you mess with it. So the more we're intervening through the taxation, the worse things are. The more you intervene by saying you have to provide your employees X healthcare, like we see this.
It's
Remember,
probably okay to slow down some level of economic growth if we can, for instance, ensure healthcare to all of our citizens. It's probably an okay trade-off to make, though.
well, I mean that's a huge debate in its own right. I mean, I'm very skeptical of Bernie and others' healthcare plans, but what I tell, and I think I'm rightfully skeptical of it. But here's the counter to that: what do if as a voter, what should I vote for? A plan that I think's a bad plan that maybe the Democrats are offering, or what's the Republicans' plan again? No plan. And that's the problem I have. Like, I don't necessarily like the Democrats' plan, but what's the counter option? I don't see the Republicans really. They just say that's a bad idea. Okay, well then what's your idea? I mean, they're so foolish. They spent 8 years or what 6 years telling us they're going to repeal Obamacare, and then when they finally get in the seats of power, they're like, "Oh yeah, we never thought what we would replace it with." I mean, that's insanity. But having said that, I still think I'm skeptical of kind of the universal healthcare type plans. At least Bernie's honest about it and says, "Yeah, your taxes are going to go up." That's better than Warren, who, oh, it's about cost, where she's asked even by left wing people, so you're saying taxes will go up for lower and middle class? Well, it's just about cost. I mean, I think that's unethical to not admit. We have a right to know. Do you would you be willing to pay a huge portion of your income and your earnings in taxes to ensure that you have health care or not? I think that's a fair debate that that the country needs to have.
Okay. I mean, we spend twice as much on healthcare as every other country, regardless, right? So it seems like we should be able to like reduce costs overall. Even if we have to pay a little bit more in taxes.
That I mean, I'm not opposed to that. That's something I think that one of the things we it's a difficult balance to maintain an ideological consistency, but also not so much that you refuse to acknowledge the real world. And I could sit here and talk about textbooks about economics all I want, but if you have a sick kid and you can't afford to pay, for their health services, that changes the calculus. So I get that debate. But what I would say is our situation, it's hard to look at us analogously to like Canada or the UK because we have vastly diverse populations, vast amount of income equality at huge numbers. And so it makes these type of things more difficult to apply like that. I would like to see more of a free market solution, but I'll be honest, I don't see anyone offering good ideas really on the right, at least not people with a voice that people are actually listening to. So
Okay. All
but
right. Any other final points or anything you want to bring up?
yeah, I was just going to say, and you might want to talk about. I also think that Trump, one of the reasons that he got elected was, I think that he was one of the first people to speak honestly about illegal immigration. And even though, again, I feel he's been stymied and hasn't got as much done as he would have liked, he's basically the only national level politician that had what I think is the right appeal to the average citizen of the United States. That we should focus on them first before people in other countries.
Okay, gotcha. All right. I'll look up. There's a lot of stuff I need to look up, and then we'll revisit this conversation at a future point. Okay.
Yeah, and if I could just say, I just want to say, even
Mhm.
though we disagree, I really respect what you do. The idea that you could bring people, like, first off, I have 500 followers and you gave me a chance to come on here. That's fantastic. And the fact that you could debate people on various topics like this, I think is amazing. So keep doing what you're doing, and I'll definitely keep checking out your channel. And I really do appreciate it. I really mean that.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate it, buddy. Have fun.
All right, have a good one.
Bye.